Hi, welcome to the Internet of Senses. I'm Samantha G. Wolfe, and I'm excited to be here today with Jeremy Dalton. When I was starting to prep for this, I was like, is Jeremy like, if I say the word Jeremy to people within certain circles, they know exactly who I'm talking about. So this is going to be a fun conversation. There's a lot of themes that we want to get to and a lot of things to discuss and a new kind of launch that Jeremy has going on. So I'm excited. So Jeremy, welcome to the Internet of Senses podcast.
Thank you so much, Sam. Pleasure to be here.
Okay, cool. So let's ground people a little bit in kind of who you are and a little bit of your kind of career journey. And as I was prepping for this, I was kind of fascinated to hear a little bit about the earliest part because it just to me put everything a bit in perspective. Even more so because I think we align quite a lot on different things, but if you could tell everybody a little bit about yourself, that'd be great.
Sure. So I've had a weird and wonderful and winding route of a career that it's been all over the place, really. So I've done everything from teaching mathematics online over Skype, for those who remember Skype, all the way through to helping disabled students at university, summarizing lecture notes for them, in all sorts of courses that I would never take myself or have never thought about taking myself, but really enjoyed the material of. So yeah, did things like that, stock shelves in department stores, and eventually found my way to PwC, to PricewaterhouseCoopers, where I began in auditing. So, for those who don't know, auditing is basically a job that involves checking company accounts that have already been compiled and just making sure that they represent a fair and accurate view of the company's financial state. It's
And
a lot of,
before people are like
yeah,
auditing and emerging tech, we are getting to emerging tech. This is what I found particularly fascinating that you start in that area and then make your way into emerging tech next.
exactly. This is the weird and wonderful route. So started off in PwC in auditing, soon moved over to business recovery. So I was involved in the shutdown of Lehman Brothers during the recession. This was around 2012. And then I spent about 2 years in business recovery before I moved on to innovation in PwC. And this is where I started to get involved in emerging technology. So I was looking at all sorts of different tech. I was looking at AI, I was looking at VR, AR, 3D printing, and trying to help companies think through what that might mean for them in the future and how it might impact them and their business. Soon after that, though, I wasn't really feeling it. There was too much strategy and too little actual hands-on building of things. And I really wanted to get involved in some of this cutting edge stuff and in a more hands-on way. And I was considering leaving the company at that point. But I did get an opportunity to move over into the newly established emerging tech team, or as it was called, the digital and emerging tech team. And this was around 2013, 2014, something like that. And from there, I started to build a brand in the virtual reality and augmented reality space, particularly. It was a technology or set of technologies that I found truly fascinating, very visceral, very unique, very experiential, engaged all the senses or a lot of the senses, the visual aspect, the audible aspect. And it was just such an incredible experience. I wondered, how could I marry the beauty of the technology that I'm seeing here with the fact that I have a job and I need to make money and a career out of it. But
You're not the only one who works in emerging tech who thinks that. Yes.
yeah, we all struggle with that problem. I had the added difficulty of needing to adhere to the constraints of a big four company. So the
Right.
big four, PwC, Deloitte, Ernst& Young, KPMG. There are a lot of constraints. They have very old legacies, which makes it difficult sometimes to pursue emerging tech in those organizations. Nevertheless, I spent the next 5 years campaigning in PwC to establish a dedicated immersive technologies team because I could see there was some value there around the use of VR and AR in business. And year after year, it was either not the right time, or people weren't too keen, or they couldn't see the value. And eventually, during this time, I was picking up projects. I was bringing projects into the company. So PwC saw some of its very first VR and AR projects in that period. And after getting a few of those delivered and successfully, in 2017, the executive board at the time gave me the official go-ahead to start PwC's first immersive tech team globally. And so I did, and I spent many years building that out and had teams of developers, creatives, business professionals, and I finally got my wish. At that point, we were not just writing reports and doing studies, we were also building software. We were buying hardware in the tens of thousands of headsets, and we were delivering actual software and hardware solutions all over the world. It was a super exciting time. I left PwC in February 2025. And up until that point, we had delivered over 150 projects across more than 50 countries around the world, related to not just virtual reality and augmented reality, but often interplays with other technologies as well. And so it was a really exciting period of time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that anyone who ends up getting into at least VR and AR to start, there is that, and I like to call it like this hump of like, I don't know, I'm not so sure about this. Whatever, isn't it for gaming? I don't really like that kind of thing. And then when you start to realize the potential beyond that and the potential that hits to like real business value, that's kind of when things start opening up. And I think that the work that you did and the influence that you had, especially in digging more into your career, like that's one of the kind of gifts you gave the industry overall. I had come from more initially entertainment and marketing and branding, and I looked at it as like, wait a second, here's this like medium or media platform, and people don't understand it. And so I was like, why don't they understand it? And it became a kind of puzzle for me to figure out. And I was like, oh, people aren't seeing the value in it, or they're not able to understand what is possible here. And so it was just really fascinating to learn about the work that you had done. And it was like, oh, he was defining the value. And of course, coming from that background and sort of the structure of PwC allowed you to do that. Did you have any like favorite ones of the? I know that they were probably all your favorites, but are there any favorites of all the, if you worked on like 150 that you're like, wow, this one
Yeah,
really was great, even if it's
there are
more than one?
definitely some highlights that stick out. I mean, we did one project which was unexpectedly a massive success globally and went far beyond what we were expecting from it. It was called In My Shoes, and it was a project that was originally commissioned by our people team. So the head of people at PwC at the time asked me if I could help develop this application that would be eventually mandatory training for all 25,000 staff in the UK. So it was meant to be an internal only training application designed to tackle unconscious bias in the workplace, a complement to PwC's unconscious bias training. And yeah, I said, absolutely. I think virtual reality is a great use case for this sort of aim. And so we went about building it, and we discussed the different aspects of it. Would we build this would we have stylistic avatars, something like, out of a Disney film, perhaps, or would we go for a computer generated, more sort of attempt at photorealism, but through Unreal or through Unity? And eventually we said no to both of those, and we pursued the volumetric capture route. So, in other words, we used real cameras, real actors and actresses, and effectively 3D scanned their and animated, or 3D scanned and videoed in 3D their movements and their talking and their dialogue, and then inserted that into a very photorealistic scene. But that's the technology side of things. That was groundbreaking at the time because we got that running on standalone headsets. So we got this running on a Quest 1. And outside of technology, just from an impact perspective, we engaged with our multicultural business network and we ensured that at every stage in the journey of building that application, their stories were told and authentically conveyed through multiple rounds of feedback, and everything ultimately was per their sign off. And so what we created at the end of the day was a technologically advanced world-class application that had incredible authenticity and impact. And it was so powerful, in fact, that we would have individuals come out of the training in tears because it was such a relatable application for them to experience it firsthand. And we had others going, wow, I never really thought about it like that. But being on the receiving end in virtual reality gave me a completely different perspective. And anyway, we got fantastic feedback like that. It ended up being so well received. It went beyond just an internal application and it ended up being spun out into its own client product. It was sold all over the world. We had deployments in the United States and Canada, in Australia, and all over the place. And yeah, it really went far beyond what it was originally planned for as a result of how powerful the technology and the implementation was. So that's one of them. And I'd say the only other one well, there are many worth mentioning, but
They're
this one
all worth
sticks out.
mentioning, but we only have,
Exactly, exactly. But this one sticks out because it was initiated as a result of a global emergency. So this was COVID. And all of a sudden, we had our recruitment pipeline cut off. Because if you don't know, PwC and many of the other companies recruit by going physically to university campuses, setting up a stall, talking to students, and then getting graduates interested and excited through that face-to-face contact. So it's a serious part of recruitment in the company. And overnight, almost, that was shut down. And for a company that takes on, over 1,000 graduates a year, it's a pretty significant hit to the incoming talent pipeline. So very quickly, within about a period of 8 weeks, we brought on board a completely virtual world that these students could join us in and engage with us. And this supported virtual reality as well. But I'd say the majority of people, probably 80 to 90%, attended via 3D immersive world on their laptop. Some of them, I mean, we didn't even give instructions, but they used their virtual reality headsets to join us as well, which was fun. But the point being, the metaverse as a concept gets a lot of flack. And understandably so, when it was overhyped so much. And we can talk about that separately. But this for me was really vindicating because it was a genuine need for a metaverse, for a virtual world. And it worked beautifully. We had over 50,000 students engage with us in that virtual world, and many of them eventually joined us at PwC. So it was a truly amazing use of technology that helped to mitigate the damage from a global pandemic. And I think that's a great story and one I remember frequently, particularly when I think about the overhyped nature of the metaverse.
oh yeah. I mean, come on. I wrote a book with Louis Bravo Martins called Metaverse. So I am right there with you. Speaking of books, though, what motivated you to write yours? I'm guessing that some of it is that you feel a little bit like both creative in your idea, but also process oriented. And maybe it was something like that. I mean, we haven't talked about this specifically, but that's my initial guess. But what
Yeah.
kind of made you go, I think I'm gonna write something.
So I'd often engage executives in all sorts of different industries about the value of virtual reality and augmented reality. And more often than not, I found there were so many misconceptions about what this technology is, what it can do, where its value lay. And so I was very keen to fight back against that miseducation in a way that was more than just a report that might go to a few companies and then, not end up further beyond that. So I really wanted to do something that had a little bit more impact a little bit more, was a little bit more prominent and widespread in different countries and different industries. So I thought, okay, well, writing a book about it, books tend to be well respected. They're not necessarily read cover to cover.
When
The
people come to me
information
and they're
is
like, I
there.
read the whole thing, I was like, you did? Like, okay. Like,
I'm always surprised when someone tells me that as well. But I do appreciate everyone who checks it out. So yeah, reality check I wrote to put into a single compendium or resource all of this data, all of these academic studies, all of these corporate case studies, all of this evidence about the value of the technology so that I could, if, next time an executive would come to me and say, isn't this just for gaming? I could slap that book down on their table and leave the room and let them get on with it. And so, yeah, that was my motivation for writing it was to try and tackle misconceptions and miseducation about the technologies.
yeah, I had I mean, a bit of that too. I think with the first book, I wrote that it was more about like explaining to marketers like what are these technologies and how can you use them? Really not in the sense of like kind of use it to promote and then get rid of it. Like it was kind of like how to use it, how it can be, part of something bigger. And then with Metaverse, it was really I had my chapter 8, which was my opus in the middle of the book that I fought for that had over 20 industries because I my reaction was not only this, let me show you each of them. And I was like, you don't have, and I think we put at the beginning of the chapter, you don't have to read each of them, but if you read each of them, each of the kind of examples and the contributors, then you could go, oh, wait, I didn't realize that it could be like these technologies can be this way or whatever, and then maybe get some ideas for your own industry. And then we had 60 contributors because I was like, I mean, I know a bit about each of the industries, but not like as much as somebody who works in aerospace all, for
Mhm.
their whole career or works in the medical field or works in architecture or whatever. I was like, let's get them to give their thoughts about where it is and where it is in the future. Again, with this idea of like through and go like, oh, here's an idea, here's an approach or whatever. So it's kind of fun that we both come to this like there's confusion in the marketplace, there's like this friction, and like how do we reduce it,
Exactly.
in our own ways, you with a huge organization and 150 examples and me being me.
But
It's
both
like,
both equally effective, right?
I don't know. We'll see. But no, I mean, that with the metaverse, I just had to always say, not just the gaming platform, not just the
Yes,
gaming, like
exactly.
everything I just said, not
Exactly.
just the gaming platform. And then you'd have spatial computing coming out. And I'm like, yes, like spatial computing, but then everywhere. And they're
Yeah, yeah.
like spatial computing, but everywhere. And then now we're in this like AI is takes over everything, like takes over every discussion. I was excited to see that like Gartner hype cycle had everything on that sort of beginning part of the curve. And I was like,
Yeah.
everybody wait, we're gonna have some backlash. Like that is coming because it can never be everything or nothing. Like that's where
Yeah.
I think that tends to happen. And that's why it's funny because, right, I get a lot of negative reactions because I say branding and marketing, and they're like, ugh, ugh. And I'm like, no, my approach is not everything or nothing. My approach is accurate and reflecting and unique, not like, let's say it can do all things for all people at all times. But so I guess maybe it's like, have you come across kind of what are the different difficulties that you've faced, and I mean, super
Mm.
successful to be able to get 150 done, get a book done, get whatever. Like, what are the things, maybe the misconceptions or the obstacles to adopting or trying a new kind of technology, whether it be AI or VR
Oh,
or whatever it
sure.
might be?
So for XR specifically, although some of this applies to other emerging tech as well, I tend to think of the barriers to mainstream adoption in terms of the CC model. So CECE, cost, education, content, and experience. Now, cost is self-explanatory. Education doesn't refer to the level of education in society. It refers to the level of understanding of the value of the technology, the education around the tech. And
That's
that is sorely
there.
lacking.
Hi, professor. Like I at least
Yeah.
try. That's
Exactly. We're
yes.
doing our
So I,
best.
I I appreciate this. I'm writing down this model thing and I'm looking it up afterwards, and then my students and everybody else, I'll be like, "Thank
Definitely.
you,
I
Jeremy
think it's
Dalton."
really useful.
Okay, so
So
keep
cost
going. Keep going.
education, content, this refers to the lack of quality, relevant content out there. So yes, there may be some really good stuff there right now, but if it doesn't solve a particular problem for someone in the pharmaceuticals industry, then it's a fun exercise, but ultimately one that's not going to generate any business or interest from them. So content's important. And then arguably, I would say the most important thing I've left for last, which is experience. Now, this refers to the user experience of the hardware and the software. How easy is it to use? How seamless is it? How intuitive is it to get it to do what you want it to do? How comfortable? How fashionable? How does it make you feel? How does it impact on others' views of you? So everything from the psychology to the physiology to the physical aspects of the hardware itself falls into that bucket, which makes it a really enormous and weighty force that is pulling down the mainstream adoption of the technology. So, in other words, put very simply, the headsets are heavy, the headsets are bulky, they're very uncomfortable to wear for long periods of time. The battery life is not that great. People are worried about privacy factors for smart glasses, for example. People are concerned about how they look. People are concerned about whether it's fashionable or not. They feel self-conscious, and the list goes on and on and on. I've got a whole slide, and it's filled with all of the factors involved. Now, this is not to say that I'm a pessimist about the technology. Absolutely not. To this day, I continue to fight for and champion virtual reality and augmented reality technology. And I 100% believe, without a shred of doubt, that it will be a mainstream part of our society in both our personal lives and professional lives. But we have to be realistic about the factors that are holding back mainstream adoption. And so when it comes to user experience, there are quite a few of them that are being worked on right now, but we're not quite there yet.
Right. I wish I had more of those kind of acronym things. I'm that I noticed
It's
and that you have quite a lot of them, and I'm very jealous of that. I end up saying things like, "So what?" and "Who cares?"
Yeah,
That's
well,
my
if you
that's
join a
my go-to is like who's going to care enough? Like who's the target
yeah,
audience? Who's going to
which I
actually
think is
buy
great.
it? Who's going to whatever? And then the so what? Well, they'll go, well, it went 1,000 times faster. And I'm like,
Yeah,
so what? And then if they can answer, if they can say, well, because it will do this thing, because it helps this person in this way, then then you start getting, okay, well, now we're providing value somehow, at least on a first pass. That tends
yeah,
to be my oversimplification because when they hear, oh, you work on marketing or whatever it is, or you work in branding, that the reaction is immediately like a shutdown, which is funny to me because it's like in all the other industries, but then with tech, not so much. And so I've tried to switch out the technical terms for sometimes brutal-ish questions to just get to the heart of it. Because I think that I thought was really great and like remembering that sort of the human element of it all. So you have this like balance of proving the value, integrating it within multiple departments, but also going like what is that experience like? Not just for the person putting on the headset who said it's like too heavy, but how do you feel when you come out of it and how do you talk about it? I mean, it was really, really nice. I was like, gosh, Jeremy, we're so aligned in so many ways. Like, it was really, but let's talk maybe because we chatted just like very, very briefly ahead of time of like the next thing coming, or at least on the verge of coming, is people talking about augmented reality glasses. And people have
Mhm.
talked about augmented reality glasses, at
Or
least
as they call
with
them,
for a
AI
while.
glasses.
Yeah, yoga or smart glasses or whatever, like
Yeah.
whatever it might be. And so how does your kind of thought and approach, how does this sort of apply within that kind of the next generation of technology that is trying very, very hard to enter the mainstream?
Yeah. So if we think about those user experience challenges I mentioned, the smart glasses form factor and vision resolve a lot of those. So we can see partnerships happening with the likes of different glasses manufacturers, like Ray-Bans is the most famous one. And that's fantastic because it's a brand that consumers recognize. It's a brand that consumers trust. It's a brand that consumers are not embarrassed to put on their face, which, let's be honest, is prime real estate.
Oh,
So,
yeah. I used to say it's the hardest time was right in front of you, having the VR headset in front of you, like on the desk or whatever, and then putting it on your head. I was like, that is what you could probably get the person in the room, you could do whatever, and then it's just looking at it going, like, I'm,
yep,
I'm now gonna do this. And you
there's
don't
a
have
lot of
that. You don't
friction
have
there.
that with with Ray-Bans for sure.
Exactly. It's a form factor that we're all used to. We're all used to putting on, if not a pair of glasses, then at least a pair of sunglasses. And so the idea of, or the view of this device in front of you is not such a precarious, daunting situation. It's just putting on a pair of glasses. So that's fantastically simple but important when it comes to thinking about the friction behind adoption of the technology. And so we've got past that, which is great. Now thinking about the other challenges, how do we deal with things like privacy? Because remembering the smart glasses era of 2013 when Google came out with the Google Glass and everybody was called a glass hole. The interesting part of that was Snapchat also came out with their spectacles at the time, which was a different proposition, but ultimately had cameras on the front of it and was meant to record you. So the very thing that Google Glass was being threatened for and lambasted for, Snapchat never got any flack for that in any significant way. Part of why I think that is because it was built in a fashion first format. So, in other words, it was built to be attractive to put on your face. People were excited. People liked seeing other people with them. Whereas Google Glass kind of came across as this was built by developers for developers type situation, which made them very
It's like
intimidating.
accounting software.
Yes,
Sorry.
exactly. Exactly. For
Right?
those who
That if you have
remember
to
it,
put something in, and usually I go, if this is really difficult, it's because it's the person who it wants to be really easy for the account at the other end. Whereas if it's kind of easy, then it's built for the non-accountants to put it in.
yes,
And so,
exactly.
yeah, sorry for the
So
parallel
no,
parallels
makes
there.
sense. Makes sense. So yeah, the importance of fashionability shouldn't be underestimated. We've got that down now. That's not an issue with all these partnerships happening. Privacy, we just talked about. What about the seamless aspect of interaction with that? Now, there's a lot of different devices we're exploring and methods. One is a sensor on the wrist, a wristband that detects muscle movements and then converts those to signals. That's interesting. Whether that becomes a proven user interface or not remains to be seen. We've got gestures that can be picked up by the onboard cameras on these devices, which itself is a real difficult challenge. If you've seen the
Absolutely.
differences
You
in,
don't want
better than I
to
do.
do
Yeah.
this. I mean, this is where before even like all of those sort of wrist-based, I love the idea of like, maybe it's integrating into a watch or whatever it
Mhm.
is, that it's like super easy to do. But I was like, if you're walking around and waving your hand in front of your face to get a thing, like people are gonna be like, what is going on? Granted, when mobile phones came out, right, that I remember walking down the street and being like, why is this person talking to themselves? Like they're and it was like, no, it was a little Bluetooth thing in their ear. And so there is the ability to change human behaviors or acceptable kind of things. But I think that there's so many different factors that go beyond this is really cool. I can't believe we can do this, which tends to be, maybe the spark of a new innovation is just that. And then later kind of figure out like how is the market gonna to figure out what to do with this? Because I think for certain people, having it record all the time is like, great, that's not a problem. Like, but not everybody is going to want that. And where and how does it apply? And like, what industries or what specific applications is it going to unlock?
In
I
both the
think,
consumer world and the professional world, right? Because it
yeah,
has applications in
absolutely.
both.
Yeah, I think that the professional world and the different industries, that's kind of why I like, I mean, we haven't talked about this before, but when I was working in the TV industry, we'd get ready for upfronts, which don't really even happen that much anymore. And you'd go like, how do I present our particular network to 20 some industries? You're like, what is the use case for our network across the industries? And that's where I just went, well, what is the use case for this technology across 20 some industry? Like, how can I figure it out? Because they can apply and they help. And that, I mean, those are the puzzles I love, which I guess are, I mean, is it marketing is branding is more general business, but I feel like a lot of the work that you did was like, this is how. And one of the things, and I'm getting a little sidetracked here, but it was like, don't just create it for one department. Like, don't just
Mm.
create it like the siloing of things. And how do you overcome that? Because it feels like you've done that or you've advised people on that.
Are you talking about the siloed nature of businesses building products?
Yeah, that if you're like, okay, if you're a business, you're like, I've heard a lot about these augmented reality glasses.
Mm.
Like, huh, what should we do here? Should we integrate them? Should we not integrate them? Yes, there's these old sort of big clunky things, but is there a way to make it cooler so more people in our company use it or that we're kind of the most forward thinking in particular industry? How would you kind of go about you know, that process to get them kind of excited.
I would say to get people excited, well, it depends on who the person is, firstly. To get business executives excited, you've always got to start with the numbers. So it comes down to building a business case, showing that there is quantifiable, measurable value of implementing this solution at some point in the future. Now, different executives will be tolerant of different timelines. Some want to see results, 3 months after we implement the product. Some are happy that this is an ongoing long-term experiment. It may not produce the results, but hopefully within 3 to 5 years, we'll see something. So yeah, it really depends on the executive and the function within the organization, their expectations. But regardless of all of that, the business value, the quantifiable, measurable return on investment, ROI, as we
Right.
often refer to, is key.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But beyond that, I mean, one of the things that ends up happening, right, is like when you talk about there's different hype cycles, different things that people get kind of excited about, especially if they're like innovators or early adopters or just like want their organization to be perceived as that, which is different to actually being and then being perceived as. But one thing that you and I discussed, I mean, I think it was a few weeks ago, it just there are things that are still very hard. Like, let's say you have a great, like a great solution, a great company, whatever it is, but there's still things that are very
Hmm.
difficult in that sales process and sales cycle,
Yeah.
even internally within your company. And is that what kind of brought you to your new venture or I'm putting words in your mouth here so you can correct me and say
Yeah, I
no,
get
in
you.
fact that wasn't it.
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you. The one of the big challenges that I faced when talking to these executives on the ROI point is having to constantly come up with different case studies, different examples specific to their industry, specific to their country, specific to their use case, the type of problem that they're trying to solve. And having to conduct that exercise every single time I was having a conversation with a new client, incredibly exhausting, incredibly frustrating and time-consuming process. And that's why, in fact, I started this organization or platform called XRHQ, which is designed to be a completely free resource for the XR and the business community to access globally, that constantly tracks all of these movements around the world. So looking at XR applications in every country and every industry and making it easy to access for people like you and I in the future that want to generate that data, improve or build that business case when having conversations with executives.
Yeah, I mean, I think we related that of putting together our books separately, and then even when I'm putting together like classes and stuff, that I'm just like, I have to dig to find. I have to like it's like, okay, well, some are on the company website, some are on a report that probably PwC or whatever generated. It's like it's over here, it's over here, it's over here. And if you're not like, especially in this world of like immediate gratification with generative AI, that it's just going to increase that amount of like friction from, hey, let's do something here, to, oh, like sort of moving through the purchase process. So when did you launch? Come on, now you can go with your promotional speech. Let's go. Let's hear
I
it.
appreciate it. So I quite literally launched in early access XRHQ on April 9th, 2026. So that is now out with a select group of early access users who are exploring the platform, submitting projects to it. And yeah, if anyone else wants access to that or is interested in submitting projects that they've been part or they've seen, just go to xrhq.com, drop me a line, and we'll make sure you can be part of the group that tests this and brings it out into full version, which I'm expecting in May, June 2026.
Yeah, I told you, I said I sent it to like five people. And because we overlap, one of them's like, yeah, I've already been talking to Jeremy about it. Like,
Oh,
yes, of course you
excellent.
have.
I'm glad.
But I figured that I think it will be just, even just within the industry, really nice to be able to like just see that this is happening, right? Counter to any kind of hype or backlash or whatever, like news surrounding things that are, positive or negative, but instead say like, this is actually still happening. Like,
Exactly. There's
in a
so
lot of
much negative
ways,
news out there, right?
yeah.
We've got news all every day about some organization cutting funding, cutting workforce, all sorts of media headlines around VR is dead and so on. And really, again, trying to tackle the misconceptions or the miseducation, I wanted to build XRHQ to do that so that people can see all of these projects coming in every day from all over the world. So, in other words, the strongest signal of the value of the technology is not that a headset manufacturer has decided to cut some of their workforce. It is that the technology is actively being used by this organization and that organization in this industry in this part of the world. So, you'll be able to get that data from
Right.
XRHQ.
And I thought that there were just a lot of different potential ways, because it's like people could look at it and go like, oh, that inspires me to do this other thing, like if they're a creator, or it feels like, I mean, this is where I think one of the things that you had said, you were like, you're wanting to try to build a community around it too. I'm wondering if you can just speak to that a bit, of maybe not just this, let's gather the data, but like what happens next.
Yeah, sure. So originally, when I conceived of XRHQ, I was thinking, okay, this will be a platform that is AI powered. In other words, it uses a series of AI algorithms that constantly scan the internet and push a load of data into XRHQ every day. And yes, that's part of it. But the other side of the strategy is the community for many reasons. One, AI is not infallible. We're going to have situations where AI data needs to be corrected or modified or enhanced in some sort of way, and only humans can really do that at that point. We're going to need insights into projects that the AI systems don't have access to. That's not necessarily easily accessible, easily surfaced data. So that's a second positive for community there. And thirdly, I think just from an atmosphere perspective, it's a far more warm and welcoming platform to have humans on there versus just machines churning round in circles, pulling and pushing data to different places. So, for those reasons, I think it makes complete sense to be acting as a community first platform rather than an AI first platform, which may be contrary to many people's strategies nowadays, given the AI hype.
Yeah, I mean it has been kind of fun or interesting to see, where and when the humans and humanity and having the where you realize it's really needed. Like initially, like you're like, oh, this can do this thing. And it's like, yes, but it's missing something. Like there's something that's not there. It doesn't feel quite
Yeah.
right about it. And it is that sort of the people matter so much. So I'm excited to see, where it goes and what happens with because I totally see the value in having this kind of resource. And I've been a supporter of anyone that's like doing really good work, you know, and learning about you and now speaking with you, it's like just the thought and the consideration along the way is awesome. So it
I
was
appreciate that.
fun to prep for this, fun to talk to you about it. I hope any other sort of, I guess, last words as we wrap this up.
Sure. The only other thing I would say is there's a lot of focus in the world right now on artificial intelligence, and AI is no doubt incredibly powerful, incredibly valuable technology across every industry. But it doesn't really matter how good or valuable a technology is. There is a point at which any investment beyond that becomes a negative return. And for many organizations, they have already breached that limit, making it a bad investment in AI. So I would just caution people in putting all their eggs into one basket with artificial intelligence and think more about the convergence of emerging technologies
Right. Which
because
we
that
did
is where the true
even,
value lies.
oh my gosh, we'll be like need a part two on convergence because that is a
Let's do a part two
whole
next time. We'll talk about
thing.
convergence.
It's a whole thing. I saw
Absolutely.
something once and I was like, the word of the year to him, and he worked in innovation, was like, is convergence. I
Yep.
was like, it's no longer just one tech.
It's about time that organizations start thinking about it in a more multifaceted way instead of pouring investment from one bucket to another, like it did with metaverse, blockchain, and now AI.
Yeah.
So hopefully we'll see businesses develop a little bit more sense in 2026.
Yeah. Or they can, chat with you to help them build more sense.
I'm always
It's
open.
Thank you, Jeremy, for coming. And I hope
Been a
everyone
pleasure,
who's
Sam.
listening or watching really enjoyed this. I know I did. And see you next time.